Yushkov, the Usurper. It was over. The Orin and his family had fled, and the guards had been slaughtered to a man. The palace was his. Yushkov strode through the halls of Korovyat, listening as the winter winds howled through shattering windows. The bodies of the dead and dying lay among the rubble, some crying out, others choking on smoke and their own blood. Yushkov ignored them all. A single blow from his hammer splintered a set of ornate gilded doors, and he entered the palace's grand hall. One of the chandeliers had fallen during the coup, littering the ground with crystal that shone like fresh snow. He crushed the shards underfoot as he made his way through the unlit room. "I remember when I first saw such opulence," he thought. "Such a waste." There was a time, years ago, when the hall glittered with lights and laughter. The chandeliers hung overhead, suspended by golden cables. Huge ice sculptures towered over long tables, and hearty coastal dishes like moose steaks sat on silver platters next to wines from Argenport and spiced fruit from distant Ixtum. The Orin had opened coastal borders to trade for the first time in decades, and the court was full of new fashions and foods. Yushkov took it all in. His family governed a frozen barony far from the capital, and he had only ever heard stories of nights like this. The young princess Svetya was to be formally presented to the court, and her father the Orin was sparing no expense. "You were right, father," he said quietly, his hand on the shoulder of a thin-lipped man with silver hair and dark eyes. Domhnall Kurtz sneered. "Nothing but filth and thieves. We are here only because we are required, Yushkov. Remember, we owe them nothing." The older man scowled. "This should have been ours. The crown was stolen from our family years ago. It was all arranged. Your great-grandfather was to marry the Orin until she fell for the son of the royal blacksmith." Together Yushkov and his father walked down the grand staircase, passing members of the Bear Guard, their pointed helmets polished to a mirror sheen. Yushkov frowned. He had heard this story a number of times, but seeing the banquet and riches on display made his family's disgrace all the more painful. "And when we levied an army to try and take what we deserved, what did the Orin do? She honored my grandfather with a barony as far away from court as possible. We were exiled in our own country. Now the Orin is," Yushkov began, "ingratiating his daughter with the court." His father snapped. "It's a show, nothing more. They sit in their palace, speaking with foreigners as our people weather long winters. They know nothing of life in Kosovo. They are weak. They barely even hunt for themselves. Cowards!" Yushkov spat as they reached the floor. "The ceremony begins soon. Then we can be quit of this wretched place." Yushkov remembered the rest of that night well. Crowds of wealthy courtiers, all in clothes far finer than his own. Tables with enough food to feed an entire village for weeks. And beneath it all, the echo of his father's voice. "This should have been ours." The Kurtz line had always been noble, so what right to the crown did the Orin have if he was more interested in trade than in providing for his people. A man who does not hunt should not eat, Yushkov thought, anger flaring in his stomach. True strength was the ability to protect what was yours and to take what you needed. As the crowd gathered for the princess's debut, Yushkov returned to his father's side and hissed, "You're right. We stand among vagabonds and weaklings." His father bared his teeth in a grin as trumpets rang out, quieting the crowd. The Orin, a tall man with broad shoulders and a beard flecked with gray, rose from a great seat at the end of the hall, a silver cup in his hand. In a deep voice filled with laughter, he announced, "Friends, family, and honored guests, welcome." The crowd applauded, and the Orin raised his goblet, beaming. "I am not a man of speeches, so it is with great pride that I present to the assembled court my daughter and heir to the crown, Svetya Katerina Stormholt-Kurtz." The doors to the hall swung open, and lantern light outlined a young girl in a glittering dress. Her hair was a bright gold, which was reflected in the diamonds around her neck and the gems on her fingers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Disgusting," Yushkov's father said under his breath. "The stones and silk from that dress could raise more troops to secure our borders or feed our barony for a year." Princess Fetya waved to the crowd, smiling warmly as she proceeded down the center aisle. Courtiers murmured and cooed as she passed. "Sycophants," Yushkov seethed. Finally, Svetya reached her father's seat, where she bowed, slow and formal. Grinning with pride, her father extended a hand and pulled his daughter to her feet. At his side, General Vasilev, commander of the Bear Guard, cleared his throat and proclaimed, "The court welcomes Princess Fetya. As is tradition, when the heir is presented to the court, they are also presented with a companion. I gave your father Zelen years ago, and I am honored to do the same for you." Vasilev gestured past a glass case holding the ceremonial crown of Kosel to a side entrance, where two members of the guard entered. The soldiers were carrying heavy gloves and stood on either side of a small white bear club that eyed the assembly with suspicion. The princess gasped as Vasilev added, "He is called Moknati. Treat him well, child." Grinning, Svetya turned back to face the crowd. Around Yushkov, people began to bow, dropping to one knee with the rustle of fabric. "They wish us to bow to her," Yushkov hissed. He could see a vein standing out on his father's pale forehead as the older man grimaced and nodded. "I won't," Yushkov said, staring heatedly at the Orin. "Look at him. Why does he deserve to rule? That could be father. That could be me." "Bow, boy," his father hissed, "before they see you." Yushkov looked over to see his father sinking to one knee. "All talk and no backbone," Yushkov thought, furious. "Very well," he growled, "but I swear to you, I will never kneel again. Not to the Orin and not to his daughter. You said it yourself, father. All this should be ours. Now all is mine," Yushkov thought as he arrived at the far side of the cavernous room. It was destined after all. "I won't let you have it," someone shouted. Yushkov squinted through the gloom. General Valisev was slumped against the base of a heavy glass display case. The door to the case was hanging open, blood smeared on its handle. In one hand Vasilev cradled the jewel-studded crown of Kusel, in the other he held out a heavy saber. "Murderer!" the general cursed. His hand shook with the effort of holding the sword, but his voice was defiant. Beneath his thigh, a pool of blood was slowly growing. "True strength is taking what you need." Yushkov bared his teeth. "What makes you think you could stop me?" Yushkov's hammer ended Vasilev's retort, and the crown slipped from the general's twitching fingers. As Yushkov leaned down to pick it up, the bent figure of his advisor appeared at the far door. "They've been found, Orin," he said. "Oh," Yushkov grunted, shaking blood off the heavy crown. "Eh," his advisor nodded, eyes alight with a feverish glee. "The family flees down an old back road. What orders would you have me send our pursuers?" In a single motion, Yushkov dropped the crown of Kosel to the floor and crushed it with a heavy boot. As he ground it into the marble floor with his heel, he looked up at his advisor and said, "Tell them there will be no survivors." Chapter 25. Defiance. Oren Yushkov, Usurper of the Kosel, arrives in Argenport with tales of cruelty following in his wake, threatening war if Caleb, Eileen, or Vara interfere. Yushkov severs all ties between Kosel and its allies. This leaves Svetya, the last surviving member of the Kosel royal family, cut off from all support, adrift in an unfamiliar city. As an early winter blankets Myria, citizens of Argenport and Kosel alike must decide if they will succumb to the numbing cold or defy it. The bar was smoky and underlit. Melted snow pooled on the steps leading down from the alleyway entrance, and bottles clinked as patrons played cards around worn wooden tables. A longhorn picked away at a piano in the corner, and a solitary couple whirled across the pitted dance floor. It reminded Milos of home. He had fled Rakano when his father died at the first battle of Argenport, and he had yet to return. His life after that, hell, the life of all rebels, had been endless persecution. There had been some victories, but many more bloody losses. He never thought he would end up in Argenport, but with one of their first decrees, Caleb and Eileen had pardoned the surviving rebels. Sometimes the dice break your way. Dodging the dancers, Milos pushed open a pair of saloon doors to the back room of the dingy bar. He was greeted with a chorus of cheers, and someone called out, "What's the news, boss?" Milos grinned. The long tables were crowded with rabble-rousers, renegades, and other rebels. His people. From the look and smell of things, they were still celebrating their pardon. They're happy, Milos thought, safe and relaxed, for the first time in years, and I'm about to change all that. "Friends," he called out, to a cheer from the small crowd. "Rebels!" drew a large reaction, as he knew it would, and the assembly toasted their general with foaming drinks. Milos waved them down, winking at one of his lieutenants, and continued. Argenport is finally free from the Iron Fist's grasp, but that doesn't mean our work is done. There were a few whoops. Many of the rebels quieted, eyeing Milos cautiously. Taking a deep breath, he said, 3 days ago, a foreign tyrant came to Argenport. Oren Yushkov calls himself the savior of Kosel. But the way I hear it, his coup was a bloody bad business. And it's only getting worse. Milos looked up at his freedom fighters. Yushkov is more brazen than Roland ever was. People are dying in the streets. He needs to be stopped. It's a cold march to Kosel, but with a hardy guide, we can... Why? One of the rebels interrupted. Why? Milos frowned. Because it ain't right. This Yushkov's a murderer. But why us? The man demanded. The Iron Fist's dead. We won. Well, those of us who survived. There was a rumble of assent from the room. Argenport's changed, a soldier added, rising from her seat. The Crown Watch fights alongside the clans rather than against them. She smiled and added, We're pardoned. Free. I can go back to Rakano and see my wife again. This time there were cheers. Sorry, boss. This just ain't our fight, someone grunted. Can I blame them? Milos thought. Ever since Roland ended the first battle of Argenport in a nightmare of hellfire, they had been branded as outlaws and criminals. They had fought and killed to survive, to keep the truth of Roland's crimes alive. Everyone at this table has lost dear friends and close allies. Can I really ask them to throw themselves back into the fight? If we do nothing, things will get worse for everyone. If we can't act, we must. It was something his father, General Azaleo, had said before the battle. Milos hadn't meant to say it out loud, but the room went quiet. If we can act, we must. You're right, Milos added, thoughts racing. We've all been to hell and back. Lived in caves, scavenged barren fields, and worse. He saw some of them nod and pressed on. And it's happening again. Not to us. No, but it's happening all the same. What if we could stop it this time? What if when the chips were down, other folks had come to help us, for no reason other than it was the right thing to do? A tired voice in the back answered, But they didn't. The room was silent. Milos pointed at the saloon doors. I'm walking out those doors to go see if I can make a difference. I won't think less of those who stay behind. You've earned that much. But we have to act now, because we should and because we can. Outside the bar, the alleyway funneled a chill breeze into a biting gale. Milos grimaced and pulled his collar up. He had grown up in his father's rebellion. He remembered the faces on the survivors on the day it all burned to emerald ashes. He had watched life forge every person in that room into hardened veterans. They were his friends, his family. He hoped they would follow him now. Winter nights in Kosel start cold and turn dangerous. The main streets of the capital were lit with roaring bonfires, keeping the cobbles free from the worst of the wet, heavy snow. At one such post, 2 sentries held their hands over the flames, ignoring their patrol around the small brick warehouse in favor of a warm seat. The revolution was over. They'd won. So what was there to worry about? The back alleys were not so hospitable. Heavy stone walls radiated cold, and slick ice coated the ground. "Careful," a man in beaten armor whispered. "Is the back Dang it. Starting over at careful in 3, 2, 1, go. "Careful," a man in beaten armor whispered. "Is the back door still clear?" One of the guards was roasting a sausage. "They're not moving," a short figure behind him hissed, pulling a heavy fur-lined coat to cover a bulging pack slung across her shoulder. "Poor bastards," the last figure in the alleyway grunted. "I almost feel sorry for them." "They're Yushkov's men. You know what they did at the palace," the first figure chided, leaning out from the alleyway to scan the dark streets. "Coast's clear, come on." Boots crunching, the group dashed to the mouth of the next alleyway. From there they cut through an abandoned stable, ducking between bear stalls and barrels of frozen fish, and found themselves at the back of the warehouse. The brown brick was old and crumbling, but the door set in it was heavy, its reinforced hinges gleaming with new steel. The leader frowned, cursing beneath his breath. "Out of my way," the elf muttered, pulling out a small velvet case and crouching down by the door. Her companions turned to face back down the alleyways as she worked, hands tightening on their weapons. "You sure about this?" The old... Damn it. Why can't I read it? Oh, I'm starting to drift. You sure about this? 3, 2, 1, go once again. Now, go. "You sure about this?" The large, older... I yawned. Let me get some water. Okay. "You sure about this?" 3, 2, 1, go. "You sure about this?" the large, older man said, breath hanging in the night air. "It makes sense," the leader replied, keeping his voice low. "The Usurper was able to arm his fanatics quickly when he took Korovyat, and now they have guards posted at this old warehouse." The other grunted, nodding. "Hope it slows them down." "Don't know about hope," the leader said with a tight smile. "Just want to see him dancing from a gallows, or an axe over their heads. Especially Yushkov's dark priest. I heard he took some of the wounded from the palace for his own experiments." The large man grimaced. "I don't know about that, but I heard tell of a larger resistance somewhere in the capital." His friend nodded. "Kosel won't take this lightly, and after tonight, Yushkov's mob will be fighting with sticks." "It's open," the elf whispered, pushing the steel door. It swung inwards on well-oiled hinges, and the group peered into the darkened warehouse. It was full of swords and firearms, all sitting in rows of straw-packed crates. The larger man whistled in appreciation. "These are Ixtun make. The traitor must have smuggled them in ahead of time." "You know what to do," the leader said, clapping the elf on the shoulder. Her heavy bag clanked, its leather strap creaking under the contents' weight. Nodding, she sheathed her dagger and got to work as the other two stood guard. 2 hours later, an explosion consumed the warehouse and everything inside it. The Kosa revolt had begun.